Okay, we are live in North Penn Television Land, YouTube Land, Facebook Land for our parent online forum tonight. Dr. Dietrich, meeting is yours.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gilmer, and welcome everyone. It's July 15th, and here we find ourselves back again online to talk about school reopening. So we got some good feedback last time we were online in May. People said they appreciated this format. So we're going to present again this evening with many slides of things that we'd like to discuss with you as a community. We have an agenda set, and we have some important material to cover, and then very importantly, we're going to accept questions at the end of this presentation. So Bob, you're going to control the screen, I believe, and show us that here. I am Dr. Curt Dietrich, Superintendent. Dr. Todd Bauer and Dr. Jenna Rufo, Assistant Superintendents, are on the event tonight also. So we do, as I said earlier, have our objectives and goals. We'll go over those in a second. We'll talk about our reopening plans. We'll do that Q&A, and then we'll talk about some next steps. So if you are looking to ask questions, there are some different ways for you to be able to do that. You can send a message to schoolreopening@npen.org, and we will have people monitoring those as we are gathering questions. Those will be fed to us via Bob Gilmer. So we would like to provide this information on the educational options for the 2021 school year, and then we will answer questions. And we'll get into that in just a minute in terms of what those options are. But we do have quite a few slides regarding background information on things, or what it will look like come the end of August there. So next slide, Bob. We did have a very large system of task forces, and we had more than 20 subcommittees. We had lots of people involved, administrators, teachers, support staff. We had parents on the committees. We also are just constantly examining the very latest guidance from CDC, from the Pennsylvania Department of Health, from the Montgomery County Department of Health, Pennsylvania Department of Education, countless other sources that send us their thoughts on reopening. And it's been a bit frustrating, I will acknowledge that, because there are constant updates and changes, but we understand that they're trying to provide us the very latest information as it becomes available. So I want to assure you that we are spending countless meetings going over all of this guidance from these different sources, and that's being incorporated. One slide real quickly here, a special thank you to these administrators that served as liaisons and committee chairs. So we did want to share with you that when we did that survey, we did that initial survey there about a week and a half ago about your thoughts on the three options. The way the results came back in, we had a little over 52% at the K-6 level saying that they see in-person as what they would like for their children based off the information they have now. The other end of the spectrum, a 100% virtual environment, was a selection of close to 17%, and then the hybrid option, rounding up, would be 31%. So just so we're clear, all of these options will be available when we ask you to make your selection. It's not like majority rules or something like that. All of these options will be available to you, and we fully intend to be able to deliver on all of those options. We do know, though, of course, that things change, so hang in there with us. At the middle level, we saw a response rate there of a little under 50% for in-person at 48.5%. The other end of the spectrum, 100% virtual, 13%, and the hybrid, a little over 38%. And then at the 10 to 12 level for North Penn High School, 54.7, a little over 54% there, close to 55, and in person, North Penn virtual just a tad under 10%, and hybrid at 35.8, rounded up to about 36. So all of those options are available, and we'll talk about more of those in just a minute. With that, though, we're going to go now. Jenna's going to take it on some of the things coming out of the health and safety area. Jenna?
Good evening, everyone. So before I begin, I just wanted to underscore the importance that what we are sharing with you here tonight is the information as we know it today. And this is a very fluid situation. It's constantly evolving. So this is the plan as of right now. And just be aware that it can and most likely will change as new things come to light. So we are in constant contact with our Health and Safety Committee and Montgomery County Office for Public Health, Pennsylvania Department of Education, Pennsylvania Office for Public Health. So just to be aware that while I'm sharing some information with you now, it could change. We were on with our staff earlier today, and as we were meeting, there was a press conference with the governor with new information, so things are really unfolding quickly. But to begin, as I'm sure everyone is aware, we do have a mask order in Pennsylvania, a governor's order to wear a face covering. So it could be a cloth mask, a face shield. They're calling those gaiters, the things that kind of come up around your neck. So students and staff will be expected to wear masks. There are individuals who may be medically exempt from that order, but we would require a doctor's note from that. So we've been talking about with our health and safety team, another idea some people had was for those individuals who might be medically exempt, perhaps putting a wristband or something on so it doesn't cause any unnecessary friction, or teachers unknowingly asking a student, well, why don't you have your mask on? But students and staff will be expected to wear masks. One thing, and I should say, it's a face covering, so not necessarily just a mask. A face shield would also be acceptable, so something that's clear that covers your nose and your mouth. So one thing that I would encourage parents to do, and we are going to ask that you send your child with one. If you do not have one, or if this child forgets it, we will have them provided, but we're really asking for your cooperation in sending your children in with masks or face shields. And I think it's important to know your child and what works best for him or her. I have a young daughter, and I know for her, just one trip to the supermarket became very apparent that the mask wasn't going to work. It's hanging off her face. She's readjusting it all the time. So we're looking into a face shield for her. So that's an option as well. We will be asking you to do some self-monitoring or monitoring of your student before sending them into work, and we have asked the same as our staff members as well, to self-monitor for any COVID-like symptoms, and we'll post all that information for you. Also, if you have traveled recently to an area where quarantine is required, upon return, we ask for your cooperation with that. We will not be performing temperature checks for students upon entering the building. That's really an optional strategy that's been noted by the CDC, and they have even admitted that it's not 100% effective because there's so many individuals who can present as asymptomatic. So we won't be doing temperature checks. We will be requiring masks, and then also asking you to self-monitor and monitor your students. For our students, our staff, we will also be providing a lot of educational materials, so public service announcements that can go on the TVs, reminders, signage about good hygiene practices and social distancing. So that will all be wrapped into things when we reopen. We will also be procuring personal protective equipment for our staff, particularly our nursing staff, who may be more frequently in contact with ill individuals. For our classroom teachers, we'll be equipping them with different kits to address some of the minor health needs. So things like Band-Aids, at the elementary tooth savers, so we're not always needing to send children down to the nurse's office. We do have no-touch thermometers that have been purchased for the nurse's office, and each building will be identifying an isolation room. So if we have a student or a staff member who presents with COVID-like symptoms, they will be isolated and kept away from other individuals. We will have sick and well areas in the health suite. So similar to when you might go to your own family physician, there's sick and well areas in the doctor's office. We're going to keep those individuals separated to hopefully mitigate any potential spread. We have also developed with our nursing department chairs and our health and safety subcommittee a coronavirus preparedness plan. And what that outlines is if we have an individual who is presumptive positive or presumed to be positive for coronavirus, the steps that we will be taking and who will be notifying, who will be contacting. And it's also important for you to know, as I mentioned at the onset, that we are in very frequent communication with the Office for Public Health. And we have actually had several individuals from Montgomery County Office for Public Health who have sat in on our health and safety meetings. We've sent our protocols to them for feedback. They've returned them with suggestions, and they've really been a part of these plans so that we're ensuring that everything we're doing is really in alignment with what the county is recommending. The county has also promised us that they are working on a flow chart for us to use with staff on providing guidance if a student presents with COVID, what do you do? How many individuals need to present with these symptoms before we consider something like, needing to shut down or keep students, notify individuals that they may have come in contact with someone. So what happens is if we notify the county of a suspected case, they then take over the contact tracing. So they will be asking us, of course, we'll be cooperating with them, for any information on who was sitting maybe closer than 6 feet to an individual for longer than 15 minutes. And then what they do is they go back, they interview everyone, and they determine who may be at risk. We will be keeping seating charts in the classroom, in the cafeteria, on our buses, so that if we do wind up in a situation where we need to provide this information, that it's readily accessible. And then the County Department of Health would contact any individuals who are determined that they need to be notified. And finally, this last point I just cannot emphasize enough, and it is something that we really need your help with, that really if your child is sick, please keep them home. The stakes are just so much higher, and we really need your cooperation with this.
So good evening, everyone. So happy to be here and sharing what we've worked so hard to develop. And just to drive home some of the points you've already heard, Dr. Rufo shared that Governor Wolf was speaking while we were speaking this afternoon. Another example is I was asked a question by the staff about extracurricular activities, in specifically athletics. And I mentioned that a meeting that was scheduled for yesterday was postponed until tomorrow. And to me, that was concerning, knowing that the governor was speaking on Wednesday. So while I shared some trepidation and concern, I did say, as far as we know, sports are on for now. And then the PIAA, since our meeting this afternoon at 3 o'clock, PIAA released a statement that they are planning to move forward with fall sports as of now. So things are changing within the hour, and things have changed since our presentation this afternoon, just to kind of drive that home and how dynamic this all is. So a couple more points before we move into the finer details. Regarding social distancing, again, as you've been hearing for months now, we are going to ask and try to maintain 6 feet of separation in the classroom whenever feasible. The dynamics of the schedule and how many people choose which options may make 6 feet apart impossible at times. We certainly acknowledge that, but we will absolutely do our best to keep our individuals, students, and staff as far apart as possible. And as Dr. Rufo drove home very clearly there, that we will be expecting face coverings. We will not be having large group gatherings such as assemblies or field trips until further notice. Meetings will occur in this format, including IEP meetings, faculty meetings when the staff that is meeting is a larger group than, say, 25. We will stagger practice of emergency drills, and then we're going to try to structure recess in a way at the elementary level to avoid students crowding. I believe the next slide is for Dr. Dietrich. Yes, Dr. Dietrich. You're muted, Dr. Dietrich.
So regarding the cleaning and sanitizing, we are following the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, for their guidelines. We will have enhanced cleaning as well as disinfecting using the EPA-approved products against COVID-19. We will be shifting some staff around so that we can have enhanced cleaning and disinfecting during the school day, and we will disinfect the high touch points periodically throughout the day, as well as monitoring those toilet rooms. Next slide. We do have an electrostatic disinfectant sprayer for each building. We're looking at making paper cups available for the water fountains. At the ventilation systems, we will start those according to the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers guidance 2 hours in advance of normal time, and keep them on 2 hours longer per their guidance. Windows will be open if possible to provide additional ventilation if weather permits.
So in terms of student materials and belongings, so students K through 12 will be using Chromebooks, and we are asking for your help in having your students bring in their devices fully charged to and from school each day. So that is a difference in the younger grades. Students didn't necessarily carry those back and forth, but because we don't want technology being shared, we will be allowing that. For curriculum, Individual textbooks and workbooks will be stored in student desks, and we'll also have online options, particularly for ELA and social studies for those texts and other subjects as well. We will have them. At the elementary level, our science curriculum is really heavily based around science kits, which is very hands-on, where students work in collaborative groups and they've all got their hands in things. So that's going to have to look a little bit different. So we're working on restructuring that curriculum to have a little bit more demonstrations and models, and still have students be able to be involved, but it won't necessarily be as much of the, everyone centered around one station. For supplies, we will develop a list of school supplies and distribute that to you in advance. Face coverings will be on that list, so we ask for your help with that. Again, supplies will be stored in desks and not shared, and we won't be using communal supplies. So having, all of the whiteboard markers or erasers in a single bin, that is not going to happen anymore. We will really be looking at more individualized supplies that remain in student desks or on their chairs. Our teachers will also be looking at ways to separate student belongings, so coats, backpacks, lunch bags, and then developing procedures for when students retrieve them so that we're not kind of all crowded in one area of the classroom when we're retrieving our belongings. We'll also be emphasizing good hand hygiene techniques, and our teachers we have been encouraging to develop procedures for movement in the room, because while we know that some of the cooperative seating arrangements that we'd like to have over the last several years, we might not necessarily be able to do that, but we still want to make sure that students are engaged and that they have an opportunity to get up, to do a brain break, to maybe respond using their technology with Kahoot or Peridot or some other creative ways, response cards or hand signals, to make sure that we still do allow students an opportunity so they're not just kind of glued to their seat all day. We will have central drop-off bins for returning materials or other papers. Again, no sharing of items, papers, or materials, and then those procedures for lining up, staying socially distanced, and moving about the classroom. For transportation, again, all individuals riding our buses will be required to wear face coverings unless you are exempt. The high-touch areas on the bus will be sanitized after each individual bus run. And then the entire bus will be sanitized after all of the morning and afternoon runs are completed. So we are going to have students when they enter the bus. So the first one on would go all the way to the back of the bus and then occupy from the back to the front. And we will have household members sitting together. So, gone are the days of choosing your seats and the oldest kids get the back of the bus. Whoever's on first gets the back, and then we work our way forward. We will be looking for increased ventilation, so opening windows and the roof hatch whenever possible. And transportation will be provided for students for both the in-person and the hybrid options.
Before we move on, I just want to amplify on the transportation. I know that's a question many parents have. These are the expectations. So, if it's something you don't feel comfortable with, then, perhaps you would want to arrange ways for your children to get to school without the use of school district transportation. In terms of how many students will be on a bus, it's hard for us to know that until we know how many actually will be selecting the various options. Clearly, with presenting 3 options, one of the advantages is it does reduce the number of students that would be on the bus at any one time, would be in the cafeteria at any one time, that sort of thing. But that said, know that there is an opportunity there. It's quite possible, depending on how many people choose those various options, that the buses will have a substantial number of students on there. So the face covering is absolutely required, and we're going to use these procedures. But keep that in mind when you make your decision as to whether or not you're going to utilize school district transportation. Okay, next slide.
Great, thank you, Dr. Dietrich and Dr. Rufo. One thing that I missed this afternoon when Dr. Rufo was talking about student belongings is we are going to permit middle school students to carry their book bags throughout the day. Our high school students do, always have, and our middle school students have not. They utilize lockers. Not that they still won't have access to a locker, but we're hopeful that if a student has a book bag, they wouldn't have to maybe traverse the building, go to their locker, go somewhere else to class. So that would certainly help to limit some of the hallway traffic. So before I get into this slide, I also want to give a huge shout out and sign of appreciation for our School Nutrition Services Department. Many of you know, and those who follow us on social media or follow the news, I mean, it's just been an incredible effort by them to provide meals to our community. Anyone that shows up, student 18 or younger, that shows up and wants a meal, they've provided. So tens of thousands of meals at this point, and counting over the summer. And it's just been an unbelievable sign of devotion by them to keep our families and our students well fed. So I just want to thank them if they're watching. So as you'll see here, there are some changes to the feeding procedures in our schools. So elementary will have breakfast in the classroom. Lunch will be in the cafeteria or the gym. And students will sit with their classroom, and they will be spaced 6 feet apart. Meals will be pre-ordered and delivered to those assigned seats. I believe Dr. Rufo or Dr. Dietrich, I can't recall at this point, mentioned that we're really going to, with the contact tracing, we're going to have to be very careful with assigned seating, and we need to know who's sitting next to whom and when. So students will be assigned seats in the cafeteria. And I know that will be a challenge in our secondary schools, but we're certainly hopeful that people will be understanding of how serious it is. And at the elementary level, the meals will be ready for the students. There will be contactless checkout with barcodes. The students will no longer punch in their ID number. And the dining areas will be thoroughly cleaned between each lunch. And of course, I said that the seating charts will be kept. Next slide, please, Mr. Gilmer. As for the secondary, breakfast will still be available in the cafeteria, and there are kiosks in the hallways in some of our buildings. There's kind of like a stand or a cart upon entrance, so that students don't have to go all the way back to the cafeteria in the high school, for example. Lunch will be in the cafeteria, and we may utilize other open spaces, maybe some more courtyards in some of our schools and other large spaces to kind of spread students out for eating. Again, contactless checkout. All items will be prepackaged, so no longer will you reach your hand in to use a spoon or a fork to get salad. You will just grab the prepackaged items that are available to the students. Student dining areas, again, will be thoroughly cleaned between each lunch period, and we will need to do seating charts for the cafeteria. Okay, for our students who are choosing, and you will hear more about our hybrid and virtual options, some more detail in the coming moments, but those students who choose those options and those families will still have access to the meals. So if you're a hybrid student and you're only coming to school a few days a week, you will still have access to meals on those days where you're not coming. We have a process in place to make sure students are still getting them. And for the virtual students who do not come to the building at all, they will have access to a pickup time and location. Dr. Dietrich.
On the scheduling options, we do have the 3 options, and you will need to choose which one is for you. As I said earlier, all 3 are being made available at this juncture. And the very first one is your traditional in-person option. Students follow a normal schedule. They will have specials in their classroom, and they'll have the same special for 9 weeks straight in order to limit exposure. The departmentalized grades, the teachers will rotate and the students stay in the room. We are working to make some adjustments in our rival dismissal procedures, and then the spaces in the buildings will be designated for some smaller group reading intervention and related services. Virtual is one of the options that's available, and in the virtual option, that would be 100% online. Related services will be delivered synchronously. Synchronously is defined as, people on at the same time, like online at the same time. Asynchronously is you log on and you find something that has been posted and you work on it by yourself. But synchronously is the method for related service delivery for virtual. The distance learning minutes have been developed, and students will receive a combination of both that synchronous, everyone on at the same time, asynchronous, you on by yourself, and each subject delivered by North Penn School District teachers. So that'll be North Penn School District teachers delivering the virtual content virtually online. Teachers follow the master schedule for their respective building and grade levels. So if you're a virtual, if the 5th grade, typically has English language arts at a certain time, math at a different time, they would follow that same master schedule. And the synchronous lessons would be recorded for anytime viewing. So perhaps there's this, need to go back and check on something, or maybe for some reason your child did miss that synchronous opportunity. You could view it any time.
Dr. Dietrich, I just wanted to jump in for a minute and just share that one of the things that we really did take a lot of the parent feedback on, particularly when we were developing this elementary scheduling option for virtual, was the parent feedback from our last forum and from our survey, which said, overwhelmingly, of course there were opinions on either end, but, pretty much the feedback was, it was a great job considering everything that happened and how quickly we needed to turn it around. But if this continues, we need more. So we just want to take a moment to assure you that it will be kind of a enhanced version of what you saw previously. So we're looking at more synchronous, more opportunities for engagement with the teacher. So that was definitely something that we took into account when designing this.
Yes, thank you, Jenna. Really needed to amplify that. Thank you for doing that. So another option is the hybrid option at the elementary level. It would look a little bit differently than at the secondary level. So it'll be a blend of in-person learning and distance learning, and that'll give the opportunity for greater social distancing within the classroom. So there is an example in the third bullet there where if you have 26 students, Group A, 13 of them would come in for their in-person instruction on Mondays and Tuesdays. Group B would come in for their in-person instruction then on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and Fridays all students would work online. So that one teacher is responsible for those 26 students, but they are in two smaller groups, one in person. The distance learning online lessons will be asynchronous through Canvas 3 days per week. So that means that when they are not in person, then they will need to be working on assignments as provided through our learning management system, Canvas. And that is new also. That's an enhancement that we put in place since last, March, April, May, June that we had before. So we'll be using Canvas those days of the week. And of course, the hybrid will be provided by a North Penn teacher. The special area teachers are going to be developing and have been developing lessons district-wide, and they'll follow the same scope and sequence. Students, as we said earlier, bring their technology between home and school, and siblings will have the option to attend in the same days. So you would have to be in communication with your principal about your desire to have, if you choose hybrid for siblings, for example, to have them both be on the same days of the week.
Okay, now for the secondary scheduling options, and for those of you who had the opportunity to see the video that featured me a few weeks ago, sorry about that, but we are able to provide some more detail at this point. So first is the traditional in-person, and this is the easiest one for folks to wrap their heads around. It's simply coming to school every day and being in the classroom with a teacher and classmates. Right now we are envisioning that class size will be a bit smaller, maybe a few students less than traditional, but it all depends on the number of families and students who choose the other options. So as of right now, this would be coming to school every day in your classroom and following a traditional schedule. The virtual platform for the secondary level will utilize the Edgenuity online component. This is to say that there is a curriculum that has lessons and components that we are able to utilize in our instruction for our secondary families. So there is a difference in what you just heard from Dr. Dietrich for the hybrid model for elementary versus a virtual and hybrid model for secondary. But we'll need to utilize the Edgenuity platform for our virtual programming, simply because for right now, we have over 200 elective courses at the secondary level. And it is easier to bring your groups together and develop this online curriculum for, say, K through 6 than it is for us to develop it for over 200 courses. So we are going to utilize Canvas. We are going to have some live synchronous opportunities, office hours, class meetings, and some activities and instruction live, but we will pull from Edgenuity for some of those resources as well. So I need to make that perfectly clear that it's not going to exclusively be Edgenuity, but we will utilize some of that. And not every one of our electives is in Edgenuity. So we're going to have to mix and match where we can utilize the teachers in the building for a synchronous opportunity, and also leverage the technology that's there for us.
Dr. Bauer, some of the feedback I'm hearing that we're getting online in terms of our scheduling options, that we just want to make it clear that these are all options and any one of them is available for you. So this isn't us saying, you know, after today, we're going to vote on whether we go fully in person or fully virtual or fully hybrid. All three options at this point in time, at least, unless we are told otherwise, will be available to you. So tonight, just think about what we're saying, what will work best for your child and your family. But we do recognize that these situations are really different. Different families have different needs, and we want to be as flexible as possible with you. So you will be able to choose either fully in person, fully online, or hybrid.
Great, thank you. Yes, further detail on how you will select which option is best for you and your family will be forthcoming. So it is not one or the other for the entire district. You will get to choose for your individual students. So thank you, Dr. Rufo. One significant change that you will see is that we will have a traditional grading structure put into place, and the North Penn School District teacher will be utilized in this format, and students are going to be eligible for extracurricular activities. Again, I said a few moments ago, as of right now, we believe extracurricular activities will be on. We have not heard otherwise. So we are planning to have our extracurricular activities, and students in any of these three options will have the option to participate in those. Next slide, Mr. Gilmer. Okay, now for the hybrid option, which I did explain a few weeks ago, and now there's a little bit more detail. So we are still thinking that we will have students who choose the hybrid option at the secondary level. This says high school, but the slide for middle school is very similar, that they will come to school twice per cycle. So we have a 6-day cycle, letters A through F, and you would come either A, D, B, E, or C, F days. So you would come one out of every 3 days for live instruction. So they would be in a class with their peers. It will look like a full-size class, maybe give or take a few students, but let's use the number 25, for example. So you would be in person with 25 students who are scheduled similarly. We realized that with hundreds or perhaps thousands of students in the same school, it'll be challenging to find 25 students who are all taking the exact same courses, but we will try to schedule students with their peers who are taking similar courses. It will require us to be a little bit flexible with some of our leveling and provide opportunities for our students with their peers. We're hoping to rotate teachers through, but in the event that a student does need to switch classrooms, the hybrid area of the building will be a little bit more secluded and won't be scattered throughout, where students will not have to traverse the entire building. So I'll use the high school again because we're on the high school slide. You don't have to go from K-pod to A-pod to B-pod to C-pod and go all over the building, but maybe your classrooms would be all on the same floor in the same area of the building. So it would definitely limit those interactions. We are certain that we'll be able to offer our core courses in the core content areas, because those early returns on that survey, as outlined by Dr. Dietrich, tell us that we're going to have plenty of students in there to build our core courses. And then the elective courses, they will be a challenge. We have to see who wants which electives in order to determine whether or not we can offer them in our hybrid format. We are also committed to trying, when appropriate, let's say that there are 2 students in our hybrid program who want to take AP Music Theory, for example. If the AP Music Theory teacher is able and willing to stream that class live to the student who might be over in the hybrid classroom or a hybrid area of the building with their laptop and their headphones on, then we might be able to leverage what we have already occurring in the building. For those we call them singletons or doubletons. There's only 1 or 2 of those courses offered. Really hard to get a hybrid section of that together. So again, there's a bullet on there that says we will try to isolate students with smaller groups of their peers. They will remain in their classrooms. They can participate again in the extracurricular activities and traditional grading structure. It is important to note, though, that there isn't a separate transportation schedule for our hybrid students. So if a student chooses the hybrid option and chooses to utilize district transportation, they would ride the bus with their peers who ride that same bus, whether they are traditional or hybrid students. So very important to note. Now jumping over to the middle school, and many of the options at the middle school are very similar, but it's important to note that the subcommittee for middle school scheduling unanimously voted for more of a block schedule as opposed to a traditional schedule. The reason for this is that it will limit the number of courses that a student is taking at one time, limits the interactions and the number of students that they cross paths with, and it also limits the number of students that a teacher interacts with because there's only four blocks in a day instead of 8. It also gives us the opportunity to have 5 lunch periods instead of 4. So in our early estimates based upon the survey and what the numbers look like they're turning out to be here, a lunch at Penndale, for those of you who have been in Penndale's cafeteria, it is tight. And a lunch at Penndale could have 430 students in it traditionally. With this new schedule, we're envisioning that we would have under 200 students in the cafeteria at one time. So that will significantly help with the challenges in the cafeterias at the middle schools. And we're also envisioning, and let's hope this is not the case, but in the event that we do get forced at any point during the year to a 100% virtual environment again, that it's just more manageable for our middle school students to manage 4 courses at home and online than it is for 8. So going back to my comments about the locker, now students will have a book bag and they only have 4, maybe 5 classes at a time. We're hopeful that they can keep their materials in their book bag as opposed to having to run to their locker constantly throughout the day. So in this in-person option, while it will be with a block schedule, and you'll hear more about that soon, the students would attend school 5 days a week, just like I said for the high school. The virtual programming will look very similar. We would still utilize the block schedule. We would still utilize some of the content from Edgenuity with a North Penn teacher with some synchronous opportunities, and we will begin to develop these courses via the Canvas platform. So the student progress would be monitored by the North Penn teacher. Parents and students would be hearing from that individual and meeting with that individual. And again, you would be eligible for extracurricular activities. The block is almost identical to the high school's, the hybrid is almost identical to the high school's format, other than the block schedule. Still synchronous when you are home, live and in person twice per cycle, trying to limit the area of the building where students are traversing from class to class. Hopefully they would be in the same area or wing of that building. And we're hoping to rotate teachers in. We do think this will be more feasible at the middle school because there aren't quite as many options at the middle level as there are at the high school level. So it will be easier to group students together based upon which courses they are taking and which electives they're taking because there are fewer options for them. North Monco Technical Career Center. That was one item that we got many questions about following our last forum and in response on the survey. North Monco is planning to be open every single day, and they are planning to be open to students who choose either the 100% in-person option or the hybrid option. They are telling us that they cannot accommodate the 100% virtual option due to the nature of a career in technical education, where there are hands-on labs and skills that have to be demonstrated in order to get certifications. So if a student is in the hybrid program and they come to school on Monday, but they're virtual on Tuesday and Wednesday, then they would be able to attend North Monco on Monday, but Tuesday and Wednesday, they would be able to synchronously live stream into the classroom, or all the lessons will be recorded and archived. But I want to drive home that 100% virtual is not an option for our North Monco students. That was breaking news during our afternoon forum. Next slide, Mr. Gilmer. So next is just a little bit more information about Canvas and why we are utilizing Canvas. And we did share that at a public board meeting with ECI last month. And we talked a little bit about it, I believe, in the last video that was sent out. But we just found, and we heard from our families, that there were some deficiencies in what we were able to provide virtually. Canvas is just simply more robust. It allows us to streamline the education and provide a more equitable education across the board to all of our students. If we did, again, let's hope it doesn't happen, but if we did have a shutdown across the district, we would be able to provide the same curriculum across the board to everyone. The sharing and collaboration tools are more robust, and the analytics of seeing when people sign on, how much time is spent. It's a tool that is leveraged in many of our neighboring districts and in higher ed as well. There are integrated tools for video, synchronous and asynchronous learning, and Dr. Dietrich did a great job of describing what those two things are. It will be easier. I know that the stream or the feed in Google Classroom is sometimes hard to manage because there's just so many announcements. Canvas is better for one-stop shopping. It's more organized and structured, and parents can more easily engage in that education. You can be an observer, which wasn't possible in Google Classroom unless you were a student or a member of the class. And we will be providing training very, very soon to everyone, including parents and families. This slide we can skip. And Dr. Rufo, special education.
Thank you. So for our special education program, we will continue to offer services to students no matter what option they select. So in-person, hybrid, or fully virtual. What it would look like differently in terms of if you are selecting a hybrid or a virtual environment in terms of special education is moving towards more live services and more synchronous instruction, or just to reiterate, synchronous is when it happens at a particular period of time. So teacher logs on at 10 o'clock, student logs on at 10 o'clock. So we're looking at how we can deliver those services more effectively online for those families that elect it. Related services as well, things like speech, occupational therapy. We are even investigating in the school building, because some of our speech therapists have very large caseloads. Are there ways that we can even isolate a small group of students and have the teacher live stream into that? For example, if it's speech and it's an articulation issue, that methodology might be effective. For a student with autism, probably not so much. So we really are going to look at things individually. And of course, if you have any questions about your child's program, you can always reach out to the special education case manager or special education supervisor. We've been developing resources to support the students' return to school for our students who have lower incidence disabilities or more intensive needs. We've been developing things like social stories, which will help with the readjustment to school, and also looking at safety protocols for our students who are medically fragile to make sure that we are paying extra care and attention to those students who are at higher risk. And for our staff members, we will ensure that they have the personal protective equipment or PPE necessary when interacting with students that might have a disability where they need more frequent self-care or independent living skills, things like support with feeding or toileting. So just making sure that our staff is very well equipped and that they have all the protection that is needed. Oh, and one thing I think I forgot on that last slide, Dr. Bauer mentioned it earlier, our IEP meetings for the upcoming year will be held virtually. So IEP, GIEP, 504, probably most meetings will be held this way. A couple of reasons. The first is that many of the conference rooms that we have are quite small, and the ability to social distance just really isn't there. We also want to limit the flow of traffic in and out of the building and minimize exposures. We've had parents that have been on these different committees, and one of the parents on our special education committee actually commented that she preferred the online IEP meeting. She said it felt a little less intimidating than walking into a conference room full of people. So I thought that was an interesting comment, and maybe something we have to think about when we return in terms of how can we make those types of meetings more comfortable and welcoming. Okay, next slide. So additional considerations, as Dr. Dietrich mentioned at the onset of our meeting, we had over 20 subcommittees who were discussing really just a vast array of things related to school reopening. And tonight is the highlight reel, so we're giving you kind of the big picture things, but we want you to know that we have been focusing on these other areas as well that are listed here. The first being social emotional learning and mental health. So we know that having been out of school for a long time is going to, for many students, be a difficult adjustment period. At our elementary level, we were already planning on implementing a social emotional curriculum, second step. So that's going to be really critical to continue to have that in place and move forward with that, just to help students readjust and get used to the transitions and routines of school. So 6 months is a long time to be away from something. So we're really going to spend a lot of time working with students, building up those relationships, making sure that they have those routines and procedures and feeling safe and connected with their teachers. At the secondary level, we'll be looking at things like nighttime at the high school, pen time at the middle school, and how we can develop some more relationships there. We also feel like block scheduling will help at middle school for teachers to get to know their students a little more individually. For our intervention and supports, one of the things that we want to stress to you as parents is that we expect that when students return that we are going to have a wide range of learners and of students in our classroom. So we always have, and we know that this break in instruction is likely going to exacerbate those differences. So we may have students who have fallen behind. We may have students who have really done well with this environment and kind of are even moved ahead. So we're trying to be proactive about the strategies we put in place. At the elementary level, we will be looking at STAR 360, which is a universal screener that'll give us a really good read on where students come in. So it's a quick assessment that we can kind of determine where the skills are, what we need to reteach. We'll be looking at similar things at pre-assessments at the secondary level. So just so you're aware, if your child comes back and you feel like they're a little bit behind, we're prepared for that, and we know that that's going to be coming. So don't panic, just communicate with your child's teacher, and we will work with you to make sure that they're up to speed. For our assessment, so I mentioned that we'll be adding a universal screener at elementary, but we will also be taking some things away. So one of the things I mentioned earlier in our staff forum was that if there is a silver lining in this, I think this whole pandemic, what it's allowed us to do is to really think about what's essential and then let go of everything else. So the things, we don't need to maybe test students as much as we were. So we're looking at dropping some of those assessments in favor of more formative or ongoing assessments and feedback rather than just waiting for a test or a midterm. So we are looking at letting go of some of that to make sure that we have enough time to catch our students up. For our support services, I did speak to special education. For gifted education, our gifted teachers at elementary will be assigned to a grade level. So while if you're in person, you'll still have your gifted support teacher. Students who are in hybrid or distance learning, we will have teachers that are working on online content for each of those grade levels. Secondary will operate similarly to what it does now with gifted seminar and the gifted IEP writers. For our English language learners, our students who are perhaps families don't speak English or students are just learning, as we have done throughout the closure, our ELL support team will be working with families, we'll be translating things, we'll be making sure that they get all of the information in an accessible format, and we'll also be looking for any students who opt to take advantage of the hybrid or virtual learning to have those services also delivered synchronously. Technology we spoke of, and then for extended school care, really we're looking to follow mostly the same procedure so that there's consistency in terms of social distancing and cleaning. So really it'll be a consistent process message for students that are staying before or after school.
And I just would like to amplify on that extended school care matter. I know we got some questions submitted in advance that asked, well, is it still available if I pick hybrid? And it is still available if you pick hybrid. So questions, we're looking for feedback from you. So if you would like to ask questions that we can clarify, ask those questions either in the comments section of Facebook or send a message to schoolreopening@npen.org. We do have people standing by, combing through those. We know we won't be able to answer every question, but if it's a question that seems like a number of people are asking, then Mr. Gilmer is going to feed that question to us. So we will need to have some decision points here. You'll have to make a selection. So again, you have those options available. It's not majority rules, and that's the one that we're doing, and the others don't get offered. We are fully intending, unless Harrisburg tells us otherwise, or Montgomery County Department of Health tells us otherwise and shuts us down. In Pennsylvania, we do fully intend to have those three options available to you. So you need to make your decision very carefully. It's very, very important that you give that some real thought and then respond to the selection form that we send to you. Those are very, real options available for you now. We hope we answered your questions. We'll take more questions if we have not, but we do ask that you make that selection. And that selection is something that you're going to have to live by then for us for at least till mid-year. At the high school and the middle schools, they're on a semester system, so we would expect that to last through the end of the second marking period. And then we'll reevaluate in that regard. Simultaneously, we'll be watching the elementary situation, and they're on a trimester. But we want you to understand that this is going to be very difficult to schedule, so we simply can't have you moving in and out and making different choices because of the way that we assign staff. So your selections are extremely important to us, and then once we have those, we're going to assign staff. So that form will need to be completed by July 27th. So we expect to send it out tomorrow, if not tomorrow, certainly by Friday, and then take your time, make your decision, but understand that that decision is binding, and we will have to have that back by July 27th. So we will continue to monitor the situation, and if there are any changes, as I said earlier, it's a very fluid situation. So in the event that government officials tell us that certain options are no longer possible within the public schools in Pennsylvania, then we know we have to react accordingly. So with that, I think we're ready to have some questions. And if we could have Mr. Gilmer start to channel some questions our way, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of responses both on Facebook and on our email, and so there's a lot of questions, and we're not going to get through all of them tonight. Some are very specific, and as we said earlier in the presentation, there may be things that are directly related to your school, to a case manager, and again, we encourage you to reach out and ask those very specific questions about your child or your principal at your building. Dr. Dietrich, right off the top, we were talking about at 2:30 today, we were talking to our staff, and right in the middle of that, we had an announcement from Governor Wolf. So, many people say, like, why are we making all these options, and why are we doing all this if all of a sudden something happens at the end of August and we need to shut down? What's the point of creating all these options that if we feel like, and we feel like generally the community, right, something's going to change before we even get there? Why even go through this process?
So there's quite a few ifs in that, and there are quite a few, what we feel might happen. So we have to plan, and we have to plan with the information that we know. Now, what we know are there is the universal mask order, and that is in place. And we know that Governor Wolf has made some other statements regarding, the way businesses are operating and that sort of thing. But everything we're getting from Harrisburg at this juncture is that school will be opening in the end of August. And in North Penn's case, we're looking at providing 3 options to families. I know that is not the case in all of our districts for various reasons, but in North Penn, we are providing those 3 options. And we know full well, we're working so hard on this, and there's a possibility that some of that work never gets utilized then because something changes quickly, but we don't know that. So for now, we need to plan, and we need to be able to move forward with what we do know.
If we could talk about, and Dr. Rufo, I know you were on the many committees, one of which being the health committee. When it comes to the county and the health department, and if there is a case of COVID-19 and the contact tracing, those types of things, and it's in our COVID response plan, talk to us about how closely we're working with the county to help us determine that if we find that someone has tested positive, what's going to happen to that class or what's going to happen to that school? How closely are we talking to our county health officials about those types of things?
Sure. So even pre-COVID-19, we had a very close working relationship with the Montgomery County Office for Public Health. When we had things like pertussis outbreaks, or we would always be in contact with them, and they would provide us with information on this is who you need to contact. This is the information that you have to provide. So that relationship, will certainly continue, and it began before the closure when we had some individuals that were positive for COVID. So really, it's important to know that we follow the guidance of the health department. So as soon as we become aware of something, we are on the phone with them right away. We're letting them know, we're assessing the situation. We have a whole internal communication plan for who gets notified, principal communication team, this group right here, to make sure that everyone is aware of what's going on and that we notify our family in a timely manner. And it's always a balance because sometimes, while we want to make sure that we're providing accurate information. So especially in the era of social media, things get out there. I heard someone tested positive for COVID, but we want to make sure that the information that we're conveying to our community is accurate, and that it's timely, and that we're really being responsible about the information that's released. So we will continue to work with the Office for Public Health. As I believe I mentioned earlier, those individuals have sat on several of our committees for health and safety, and so they've looked at our protocols. They've told us, this looks great, here's what you need to tweak. So we've been very happy with the communication with them.
Another question that keeps coming up is, we talked about how long the commitment, when you select your option, how long and can I switch? And we're asking for that semester commitment to that option. The other part of it is, if I've got a kid in high school, maybe I got a kid in middle school and I got a kid in elementary school, am I able to select different options for each child? And what impact does that have if I can't do that? If the high school's fine with doing virtual, but I really want in person for my elementary student, how does that work? And do parents have the option to select by child as opposed to by family?
They do. They can select by child. So if they have a different situation, depending on the child, go ahead and make the selection that's best for your child.
Dr. Bauer, we had a few questions. I know they're from some students, and so not everybody may understand fully what it means, but to define block scheduling, of what that means for students and for families. So at the middle school, when we say we're going to block scheduling, if you can maybe describe a little bit, what's that look like to a student that's in a block schedule?
Yeah, so the quick response to that is that periods are twice as long, but you have half as many classes. So you would, the way the schedule is shaking out right now, students would be scheduled for 2 major courses a semester, or 2 or 3. So you might have English, math, and your world language, and then your specials period. So you would not have all 4 or 5, depending where you put world language, all year long. You would have it for a semester. This is very common. Many districts in our area have it at the middle and the high school level. Souderton comes to mind. Central Bucks has a version of a block schedule at middle school. I know that Wissahickon has a unique structure as well that kind of fluctuates. But it's a way that we can limit the number of contacts that students have and the teachers have with students, and also kind of simplify. Some of the feedback we got since the closure in March, many parents reached out and said, can my child just focus on their core content areas? Like having 8 Google Classrooms, and then you throw in the electives, and maybe it's 10 to 12 Google Classrooms that I need to go in and check and make sure my child's on top of things, was just so much to handle. So to try to help with some of the other things that I mentioned, with the number of students you're interacting with, the teachers, the cafeteria challenges, the management of all those courses at the middle school level, students will be scheduled for 4 periods. But one of those periods will be broken into 2. So it's really 5 periods. It's 4 blocks, but 5 periods. And the 1 block will be your specials period. So you might go to PE and then music during 3rd block. But you might have math, English, social studies, 1, 2, 4. So I hope that helps. I know it's confusing. But one thing I did want to mention that Dr. Dietrich just addressed with this child selection, one of our elementary principals said a parent reached out and said, I want my child to be in the hybrid program, but it's really hard for me to manage both kids or all 3 kids at the same time at home. Is it possible for me to put both my kids in hybrid, but have them on different days, so that I only have one home that I'm helping with distance learning at a time? And those are things we're going to work through, and hopefully will be addressed in that survey as well. So there's a lot of options, and we really do believe that the size of North Penn can be used to our advantage, because we can provide more options for our families in many of our neighboring districts.
I just want to underscore again there, if you have a situation where you do have 2 elementary students, for example, one that's in the early elementary grades, one in the later elementary grades, and you say for the one in the particular grade, I think hybrid would be wonderful, but I don't like it for the other one, you can make that choice too. You can make different choices depending where your kids are in terms of how best we're able to educate your children.
And to that point of alternating days to be able to support your child is one thing. We've also gotten a lot of questions. Can I have my kids be on the same days so that I'm not transporting, I got to worry about it goes both ways. So I'll make the assumption if you have those concerns or needs, you would outreach to your principal. Does that be accurate, right?
Yeah. So unfortunately the way that the schedule works for secondary and elementary, they're not on the same cycle. So they won't align perfectly. There will be a lot of overlap because of the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday structure, but it won't be perfectly aligned. I'm sure people can understand that. We've tried to align things, but it simply doesn't quite work out. So your secondary student and your elementary student could be on slightly different schedules, but they will overlap some.
I'm going to stay on scheduling here for a second. Just a couple questions I saw here, and just to clarify. So if you have your hybrid teacher for third grade, that's my teacher, hybrid teacher in third grade. Is that at my school? Could it be at another school? And if that's the case, how does that work out? And then we could also talk about then the virtual part of it. If I'm all virtual, and I'll stay in the elementary land for this, if I'm all in virtual, am I at my school? And is there potential to be at another school with a teacher in another school? But do I have the same teacher all the time, or is it going to be different teachers depending on the days of the week?
No, you'll have the same teacher, and it'll be the teacher from your school in the hybrid program. In the 100% online program, though, that might not necessarily be a teacher it'll be a North Penn teacher, but it might not necessarily be a teacher from your school because those students don't come into the building. So for scheduling purposes, they will be aggregated together and then staffing assignments will be made. But for the hybrid program, you will have the same teacher. It'll be a teacher from your school, and you'll be coming to your school.
Dr. Rufo, we talked about this earlier today, but the specials at the elementary school. I don't know if you have your document to pull up again to talk about what's that look like for art. So we know we're going to do them in 9-week sections, but what's it look like in art, in music, at the library? What are those different pieces? How's it kind of break down and to give somebody an idea of what that would look like for specials, for phys ed, et cetera?
Sure. So I think the goal overall is similar to what we're trying to do with maintaining the social distancing and then reducing the number of contact with high touch surfaces and materials. So for example, so as you have mentioned, Mr. Gilmer, so we will have the special area teachers kind of going in 9-week increments. They will be traveling to the classes. So for art, they'll be bringing select materials, sanitizing everything in between use, making sure that we're cleaning. Again, no communal supplies. We'll be emphasizing hand washing. We're also making lists in terms of materials that we will need to order because we won't be sharing things as much. Teachers will be wearing gloves when they hand things out. And we're going to keep the art materials separate from the home materials. And then, of course, disinfecting, wiping things down. For library, so students will be encouraged to check out books through the online system to reserve them. We are also in the process of investigating a grant for Overdrive, which is digital library books. So hopefully that will come through. We're not quite sure yet, but it will be a great option. Students will be permitted to borrow 1 book per library cycle, and the librarians will pre-select some materials and bring them to the classrooms. When library books are returned, they will be quarantined for 72 hours before they're released into circulation again. For music, we will be looking at scanning and projecting sheet music, wearing gloves if we're using any of the ballots or the classroom instruments that are shared, disinfecting in between classes. We are looking similar to, I didn't get to PE yet, but we're talking about having phys ed outdoors whenever possible. And our music teachers have asked about that too, if it's possible, just to have some more space to use the instruments. So certainly if we're able to do that and space providing, we would look at that as well. There are a music organization and phys ed and library national organizations that will be coming out with reports in the next couple of weeks. So we will also be reviewing those and then updating some of our recommendations once they come in. And then for PE, students will be designated to certain areas. We'll be going outside as often as possible. When we have to utilize the in-the-classroom piece at elementary, we'll be looking at more of personal fitness and health and those types of concepts, and we'll have minimal use of equipment.
Well, we're talking about music. It's a question if we know, and maybe we're waiting for more guidance. on our groups. So if you're in the chorus at the elementary school or the band or orchestra programs, do we know what they're going to look like when we begin in the fall?
We know what we want them to look like. We are waiting for a little more guidance. So certainly, our staff, our teachers, they really want to make sure that we're implementing these programs. So unfortunately, I don't have a 100% answer just yet of this is what it will be. We have to kind of wait until we get a little more guidance, until we get some more information, even in communication with the county health department, running some of those things by them. So stay tuned on that. We will be making every effort we can to get back to as close to normal as we possibly could with those subjects, but we recognize that there are going to have to be some concessions there.
So I'd like to just get back to scheduling just a little bit, and Dr. Bauer, if you could talk to, so secondary put all their schedule requests in. So at the middle school, they requested a certain number of courses and certain types of courses and electives, same thing at the high school. How are we, the two questions are we trying our best to make that schedule work for the students of how they scheduled it? And then how would students know if they couldn't take a course or we're not going to be able to run it for whatever reason, there's not enough enrollment, whatever happens there, of what type of course that would be, or if they've got to pick something different, what's the scheduling look like, and how will students know what they did or did not get in their schedule?
Yeah, great question. So first, you started with, will we try our best? And you just gave me the biggest softball you could give. Yes, we will. However, so I'm not going to put anything past our teachers. The lift that they have done since March 12th has been spectacular. So I was going to use, while you were asking the question, and of course I was preparing my response, I was like, all right, use ceramics. We're not going to do ceramics in a virtual environment. I wouldn't put it past us. So what I will say is, Dr. Dietrich said that the survey, or we're calling it a selection, not even a survey anymore. Like, we need folks to select so that we can answer these questions. And as much as we appreciate the survey from a few weeks ago, the response rate was somewhere around 50 to 60%, in some cases even less. So we don't know who the students are, and we don't know which courses they want. Now, the hybrid option, for example, came back a lot higher than I personally expected, which tells me when you have more students, we'll have more opportunities to run more classes. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at who the kids are and what their courses were that they requested. Families and students will need to be understanding that there are going to be cases where we'll need to collapse some levels. We might not be able to offer this class at 5.0, 6.0, and HP, for example. But we might be able to offer it at 6 and differentiate within that classroom. So it will also have, and I provided that AP music theory example, we may have an engineering class that 5 students want, and I might not be able to take Mr. Reichwein, one of our engineering teachers, out of his classroom with 25 kids to come teach those 5. But he might be willing to let us stream his class to those kids across the building who are in APOD in the hybrid section, or those students who are in MPVA where that course doesn't exist in the Edgenuity platform. So I've met with so many department chairs that are like, hey, there are kids, we want to teach them, bring it on. There may be some circumstances where we just can't make it work. And then we would have to reach out to those kids and say, look, we can't offer you blank, but this is what we can offer. We're also willing to get super creative. If we have students that are interested, I have a meeting tomorrow morning with Montgomery County Community College and their dual enrollment program. And maybe Montco will be able to offer some classes that we can't offer virtually. And then students can kind of double dip, get some college credit and some high school credit. So we are lifting every stone and trying to see what our options are. But I'm confident that we will have a wealth of options. But I can say with some level of certainty, we won't be able to offer everything.
And communication is going to be the key there. So, give us your selection in that form selection, but stay tuned, stay close to, your communication channels, because you may be contacted by one of the assistant principals, perhaps, or the high school principal himself, or maybe a guidance counselor. Somebody may be in contact with you and saying, so this is what your options are. You can do this, you can do this, and what you want to do. So please understand that we're going to need you to stay in constant communication and contact with us as this becomes clearer.
I did fail to mention, and I kind of give a little anecdotal. bit a few minutes ago, that I think it'll be easier to meet the needs of the middle school students from a scheduling standpoint because there are fewer options. And when there are fewer options, more kids pick the same option. And so the chances of having a group of students picking the same class is higher. So I think middle school students in the hybrid or virtual option will have a higher likelihood of getting all the courses they want, where I think the high school kids will get most.
So we're going to stay on scheduling, and we're just getting, everybody's really interested tonight in swimming. So I just want to answer it, and I don't know if we have a direct answer to how everything will look. So if I'm in virtual, what's happening as a sophomore swimming? If I'm in hybrid, if I don't want to do swimming this year, can I take it later? I don't know if we have an answer, but I feel like we have to answer the swimming question.
You make me think.
Dr. Bauer's a swimmer, so he's going to take this one.
Yeah, so I was a swimmer in high school and college, and in a previous life, I coached swimming. So it is near and dear to my heart, and I feel as though students are trying to take advantage of the circumstances here to get out of swimming. So this is what I know right now. We are told, and what you read in terms of guidance, the actual pool is not a significant concern in terms of a spread of COVID-19. What could be a concern is a locker room and a changing situation, how close you would have to be to another student. But in many cases, we change for gym class too. So I'm not sure that that's exclusive to swimming. I did reach out to Mr. Franick, who is our department chair at the high school for PE, and Mrs. Giamarco, who's our curriculum supervisor, because I was reading through some of the questions that have been sent in already prior to this meeting. And Mr. Franick, who is the eternal optimist, says, "We've got this. Tell the kids we'll have swimming." We're still working through it. And we really have to make sure that if there is guidance, and Dr. Ruffo hinted that many of our elective content areas are expecting to deliver some guidance soon. If we're able to comply, we would like to have swimming. But we'll also be realists there. And if it's not possible, then we're going to have more PE classes. So we are going to try for swimming. Sorry to disappoint students, but that is not with certainty at this point.
Okay. Dr. Rufo, and this could be very individual too, a question here about post-12. What's happening with post-12 as far as scheduling, or are we just waiting for the options and the selections to come out to find out what we're doing with that?
Yeah, so we want to see how the survey comes back. We'll look at how many students that we have that are looking to take advantage of that option. It is a smaller subset of our population. And just for anyone who's watching who's saying, well, what is post-12? So post-12 is our students who have IEPs. Usually students who have some more significant disabilities are allowed to remain in school until they're 21. So we call that post-12, students who have completed their high school requirements, but they're remaining with us. So, I think we are trying to be as flexible as possible. So once we see what comes in, I'm sure we will be trying to work with families to come up with a plan that works for you. The nature of that program is highly individualized to start with. So we do a lot of normally job training and things like that, which are very specific to those students. So I would expect something similar there. But once we get that information back, we'll have some more answers. And again, we want to work with you and make it as flexible as we can.
Great. As far as looking at the elementary school, particularly like sixth grade, are we keeping the students in the same room, homeroom, stay there? Will teachers be moving, students be moving for math and ELA, those types of things? So typically sixth grade feels a little more middle school-like, right, where they're moving around a little bit. So what's our plan? Where will the students be regardless of the instruction?
On this particular COVID time, actually, the teachers will be the ones moving and the students would stay at the same desk within the same room.
Great. There's a question about if we can expand upon this, and Dr. Bauer, I'll throw this at you. More details about the virtual academy, what it is like. Who are the teachers in the virtual academy? How does the curriculum compare to North Penn's courses? And how are things like science classes where you do labs, those kinds of things? How are they conducted?
Right. So in terms of who the teachers are, in full transparency and honesty, I can't answer that right now because I don't know how many teachers we need in the virtual environment. I do think we'll have some teachers who are exclusively committed to providing online instruction to our secondary students. And then I think we'll have some teachers who are scheduled for one period just to teach one class in virtual. So I'm not sure that we will have just all teachers who only teach virtual. It'll kind of be a mixed bag there. In terms of the curriculum, it's not perfectly aligned, but all the components are there and all the standards are met. So what we would need to do on our end, the administrative and the teacher end, is take the components out of their curriculum to align it to ours. So what we are not looking to do is say, here's your Algebra 2 course, take it, navigate it, good luck. Rather, we are going to kind of be a la carte and select items that align with what we are doing in our classrooms and keep our students in lockstep and on pace with our live students so that they can bounce back in. So it is not the exact same. I need to be honest with everyone, but there are components that are the same, and the standards and the objectives are absolutely the same. And we need to make sure that we tailor it to meet our expectations and then supplement and build in Canvas to make it the best experience that we can for our students. So I just hope people understand one of the things that we've really been working on is the fact that at the elementary level, it's just, you can get your 40 teachers across the district to work on 4th grade in Canvas. Whereas when you have over 200 electives at the secondary level, in many cases, you have one teacher that teaches that course. And you don't have 40 hands in the pot to help and build this robust online curriculum for the rest of the year now. So we are going to do the best that we can in pulling it together and pulling from Edgenuity and building on this end to make it work for our students.
I just want to underscore that'll be a North Penn teacher. So it's not, as Todd said earlier, it's not like, hey, here's your course and we'll talk to you in June. That teacher will be charged with monitoring very closely, what content is given to the students, and then also very importantly, how mastery is progressing, and if there are issues where the teacher notices that there's certain concepts that that students are struggling with, that teacher will be charged with doing tutoring or doing specific lessons that reinforce a concept that students clearly are struggling with. So we really want to underscore, as Dr. Bauer said, the teacher will be pulling content from Edgenuity so that it doesn't have to be created from scratch and assigning it to students, but very, very engaged with being available to students, being there to provide tutoring and to provide help and to just answer questions for a student that is struggling, if that should be the case.
As it currently stands, Mr. Gomer, this past year, prior to the COVID shutdown, in North Penn Virtual Academy, the students could come in because we run the Virtual Academy out of Northbridge. At least we did when it was smaller scale with, say, 60 to 70 students in it. Now that there may be 600 students in it, it might look a little different. But there were office hours and days in the teacher's schedules where kids could come in and get help. So very different than your typical cyber charter or cyber school, whereas there's a live person down the street that you can go visit and get support. Certainly aware that some people will choose a virtual environment because they're not comfortable coming into the building, and respectful of that and having the online tutoring sessions as Dr. Dietrich is describing.
Question here about attendance, and we talked about it in the presentation, briefly saying attendance will be taken. What's that look like in hybrid and virtual world? And if we want to break this down between what secondary might look like compared to elementary, because the virtual at the high school is a little different. How do we account for attendance in the virtual land?
So in the secondary world of virtual, when there are synchronous opportunities, that's easy, right? And so we described that the hybrid option will be live and in person in the building on one day, the next day it'll be synchronous virtually. So if the student is not logged on at the appropriate time, well, then they didn't attend. That's not to say maybe they won't submit their work, but we are requiring attendance. And that was something we heard loud and clear from families and teachers. Like, we need required time and face-to-face. In terms of an asynchronous model, in many cases, if a student were to do their work, complete their assignments, and turn everything in on time, that is representative of their attendance. They still will need to schedule times with their teachers to check in. But if they are staying on top of their asynchronous work, that will substantiate their attendance. Back Dr. Dietrich, do you want to address elementary school?
Yeah, I just want to underscore it at the secondary level too. The expectation is if you select the hybrid and there is a synchronous, meeting happening there, that you have to be on. So you'll follow the same schedule. You might be doing it online on a particular day, but if you have English first period, English meets at that time, and then math class meets at second period, and social studies meets third period, you need to be on if you're in that. So it's no, hey, I feel like sleeping in and I'm just not in the mood to get up and get online. You need to. So that's an expectation. We're not going to budge on that. That's extremely important. If you're in the 100% virtual environment, then there are far fewer of those synchronous things, but there are some. So whenever there are some, you need to be there and you need to attend. And we will take attendance, and you will be expected to do that. At the elementary level, then the hybrid offering doesn't have near the amount of synchronicity to it. That sounds like an old Police song, I think, from many, many years ago. The group called The Police. I think they had synchronicity. I think it was them. But I digress. But you will need to understand, though, that for attendance purposes, every day we will have a check-in with you to be able to, determine that you are engaged and you are doing work and everything like that. So that's important.
For the hybrid option, what opportunities do students have for one-on-one help from their teachers? Is it only during the in-school days, or is it virtual office hours, or is it both? How's that work for Dr. Ruffo, if you want to take the elementary one? How's that work in hybrid for additional one-on-one help? I need a little help here.
So at the elementary level, so in addition to just the regular core subjects, we will be working out a system too for students who need intervention or who receive specialized intervention services. So we will look at building that in, but we're looking at kind of the 2 days on, 2 days off, and then for teachers. So they would have one group for 2 days, another group for 2 days, and then the Friday to really kind of plan and have an opportunity that if they need to check in with students, that they would be available to do that.
Yeah, so we're clear then, if you choose hybrid at elementary school and it is not your day to be in person, we'll be working online by a work that's assigned by the teacher. That teacher will be engaged with those who are in person on that particular day. If it's a Monday and a Tuesday, but during the Wednesday, Thursday group for in person. So there will not be, near that opportunity as you might experience maybe at other levels, because the teacher has, under that model, the teacher has, some in-person students to work with. So the teacher will be making assignments and talking to you about, okay, it's Tuesday, tomorrow you will be working online. You will not be with me in person, but these are the things that you'll be doing. Perhaps some additional material, released at some juncture during the course of the week there.
So, we continue to talk about how things change, numbers change. If we start the year or before the year starts, we are not able to do in person. What's the plan to make the shift for in person to the next thing that we're doing, if it's in October or if it's in August, or maybe it doesn't happen at all this year? But if there's a shift where we're told we cannot do in person any longer, what's the plan for in-person instruction?
So then we would shift again. And that is a scenario. When they first shut us down in March, they said that, well, you're closed for the next 2 weeks. And then we were waiting during that time period to see if it was going to be extended and for how long would it be extended. I mean, let's be real here. There are those possibilities where we are, in session for, a couple months perhaps. And then, we're told that we have to shut down for a couple weeks. We would pivot then into the 100% online, and those teachers would be delivering instruction like you normally would have seen in person. They'll be doing it online then. And that'll be very, 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 very much more synchronous than we had back in the March, April, May, June of this past year. So you would expect to follow your normal schedule, and it would just be a synchronous kind of a thing. Maybe not 100% of the time synchronous. There might be delivery of content and then a break in there where students are working independently. but much more synchronous than we had here in March, April, May, and June.
And we do have teachers over the summer who are working at the elementary level. We're calling them our super creators that are creating content, and then at secondary, a core group of teacher leaders that are developing things, because we really do want to be prepared for that scenario, and we don't want, what happened last year, we're in school on Thursday and then Friday we're not, and we're scrambling to put something together. So I also think that the benefit of us having 3 options is we already have a plan. So obviously we would need to modify it a little bit, but if we get told at the end of August that, you can open, but you can only have classes of 15 or whatever it is, well, we've already got a hybrid model to build from. So I think that we're really well positioned to transition to whatever it is because of the work that we're doing now.
So we were talking about schedules, and obviously there's a lot of scheduling questions. I guess first, in general, if you were a 9th grader that took high school courses and got bused to the high school to take some courses in the morning and then head back to the middle school, or vice versa, or if you were in the elementary school, I don't know all the particulars, but there's some questions here. If you moved to another, because you were advanced in math, or maybe you took 5th grade math, and maybe these aren't great examples because I don't know exactly what they're looking at, but if you were moving out of your grade level to take other courses, what's our plan for students that have that advanced work or come to the high school when they're not actually at the high school or coming from the middle school? I guess even from the elementary to middle, I think there's some of that too.
So the easiest way to address that is to say, fear not, because we have it covered. So the iterations there of students coming up from 5th or 6th grade, or students coming from the middle school up to the high school, believe it or not, the block schedule works better with timing. It works better for North Monco students. So it will align nicely. Students were coming up to the high school for 2 periods anyway, at least 2 periods from the middle schools. So now the 2 periods works perfectly with a block because it's a double period. So it really aligns nicely. It will work. I've already met with the middle school schedulers going both ways, from middle to high and elementary to middle. We have a plan, and I think we have it covered. But in the event that it is a particular challenge because of the courses that the individual student needs, now that we have so many online options, whether they be the 100% virtual through our virtual academy or the hybrid option, we can do a lot more streaming and synchronous learning that student might be able to stay in their building and stream in. So we'll be better equipped to handle those scenarios this year than we were last.
It's an interesting question coming in here, is that, is there a threshold that if it flips and it's 70% of our students choose, or parents choose for their students, full virtual, is there a threshold where we don't do in person because too many people signed up for hybrid or virtual? Is there a threshold at all, or do we have the flexibility to really kind of move this around to meet the needs of everyone?
Go ahead.
So
Doctor.
I think, again, we're going to have to see how the numbers turn out. The previous polls that we've done, and we look at other polls that have been done, we still believe that there will be a substantial number of students that would want to have the 100% in person, that we would continue to offer that. So I don't have any kind of magic number in mind. If it turns out to be, extremely low, of course we'd have to, rethink all of that. But we're just going to have to see how this plays out and see where people are choosing, making those selections, and see how, things progress.
Ending last year in our virtual environment, obviously we have transitions that are taking place from 6th grade to 7th grade, 9th grade to 10th grade, new kindergarten. You might have moved and you're going into a new building. What are our principles? What are we working on to acclimate our new students into the buildings as they're coming in? Usually we'd have a welcome back night and all of those types of things where we gather, maybe even have a picnic. What are some of the ideas or plans that we're working on to help our new students get used to their new building and welcome them into their new environment?
And I don't have those specifics on the ones that might have been moved from one building to a different one. For example, some Inglewood students might be going to Gwynedd Square or going to Nash, whatever it might be. But I do know that those principals, if they haven't already communicated, they'll be communicating real soon. because I had that conversation with them not that long ago. There's enough of a gap in there. I wouldn't be surprised if those parents already got that communication, but that was promised to me. Todd or Jenna, do you want to talk about some other kinds of like general kinds of transitions from building to building?
Yeah, so this was actually on the secondary principals agenda this week and last week. And we have two programs that are national, maybe even international programs for orientation. WEB is an acronym for Where Everyone Belongs, from elementary to middle. And then Link Crew is middle to high. And they've been smashing successes for us. And unfortunately, we don't envision them in their most traditional sense, where we start with 1,000 kids in the gym at the high school, for example, or 300 at Pembroke, and they do activities and they break into small groups. We just don't see 1,000 kids gathering in the same location. So the Boomerang project runs those two programs, whether it be Link Crew or Web, and they do have a virtual version of that, which we are pursuing. But we are planning open houses, and Mr. Gilmer, you alluded to a picnic. Mr. Nicholson at the high school actually said in our meeting, like, can I still have a picnic? And we said, sure, but think graduation. It's going to have to be in waves. I'm not sure it's going to be 7 days worth of picnics like graduation was, but we'll have to have like 2-hour windows where students in this band can come and gradually let students walk the building with their schedule, maybe meet some teachers, and have a snack that is prepackaged, and no sharing of utensils or anything. So we're planning for that too, just another thing on the list. But it was an agenda item the last 2 weeks, and I know the principals are planning.
Right, and similar for kindergarten orientation, so it won't be as it was, last year. It was great, it was nice having everybody come in at once, but that's just not going to be possible. So we do want to make sure that we're still acclimating kids to school, so we'll have similar plans like they're doing at secondary.
So one of the items we talked about, and probably more particularly at secondary because of the bell changes and schedules of staggered release time for hallways. I believe in our slide show there we had staggered times for arrival and departure when our masses are coming and going. What are some of our thoughts on those staggered times? And I'm going to tack onto it and someone else can jump in here. Are we still going to be doing late arrival for seniors, early release for seniors, those types of things that they've typically done? And is there any thought to allowing more, say at the high school, to do that late arrival if the schedule allowed, or early release?
Yeah,
so one question there for you.
Sure. Yeah, we are encouraging it when the schedule allows, just to try to kind of offset and augment. But I'm not sure that we're in a place right now where we're saying that these students will come at 7:07 and these students will come at 7:15. Rather, we're trying to better utilize campuses to open more doors, have certain buses going in here to better distribute drivers. We are envisioning that there will be significantly more drivers, and I understand that. My own children are in elementary school, and there's a good chance that I'm going to get them a ride to school each day. So we understand that, and we have to take some measures to try to account for that. Some of our elementary schools in particular will have a really hard time with increased ridership because it's just difficult to get in and out of those campuses. And if your students go there, you know who you are. So we're trying to be creative there, but I'm not sure we're at a point, and unless Dr. Rufo or Dr. Dietrich know differently, I don't think we're at a point where we're saying, okay, you can come at this time and you can come at that time.
No, we're still working on all of that. Once we know on this selection, it keeps coming back to that. When we know how many are in the different options, that'll help us more with what we're dealing with. But it'll be a challenge, but I believe we're up to it.
So the other side of, there are a lot of questions about, can I switch plans at the end of the semester, or when can I switch if I didn't like it or things change? Are these three in place all year, no matter what changes? We have 0 cases. We have the best vaccine we've ever found. There's no more spread. We forgot the name COVID. Are these three options here from September to June? And we're good. So if you want to stay where you're at, and even if things change, you're like, I really like hybrid, we're going to stay this way. Is it going to stay this way for the whole year?
So that's a really interesting, I thought suddenly now, Bob, is it getting late? And now you're starting to get a little bit, dreamy, but we can dream as far as, but we have this, a solution here that is incredible with a vaccine or a perfect cure or anything like that. We're hopeful, of course, but the whole vaccine is going to be really challenging. First of all, to get a proven vaccine, and second of all, for the manufacturing companies to be able to manufacture for a whole globe, a whole world that needs to have 7-8 billion doses here. That's just going to be really interesting. So we just need everybody to hang in there with us. We'll watch how this all materializes, and know that we have your best interests at heart to try to educate your children effectively and to keep them safe.
Great. Now we're at about 8:36, so we usually do these at about an hour and a half. And again, just for everyone, there are lots of questions, and there are some we don't have the full details on, just to get into the individual pieces. But we do have all of the questions and recommendations that you've sent. As we get to a wrap up here, Dr. Dietrich, what do we need from parents? Obviously, we need to know by July 27th what option they'd like to have their child do. What are some of the things we need to do, and how they help us when we go into the school year, as far as checking your own students, those types of things? What are we asking our parent community help with?
Well, clearly, as Dr. Rufo had said, we will fully expect that you will be monitoring your children before you send them to us. So you'll be doing that checking to make sure that you're not sending somebody that is sick to school. That's extremely important. We do ask that you, if you haven't already done it, and I imagine most of you have, because you're probably out and about in some regard, but make sure that you've bought, a face mask or a face shield or a gaiter, or whatever it is that you're going to be using for the face covering. And that's important as one of your kind of back to school kinds of things on the list that you need to make sure that you get. Also, really, it's important for you to stay in good communication with us, particularly with your building principal. Your building principal is very caring and is trying to look carefully at the results on this selection. And there might be some questions, or there might be, a challenge here or there to figure out what is something that is going to work for your child. So please, return those phone calls, those emails, and stay in touch and communicate with your building principals, your assistant principals. That's really, really important. This is a partnership, and I think together we can do this. But we do need to have full communication and full cooperation. Also understand that when we say that students will have to wear the mask, that means they'll have to wear the mask. The only possible reason would be if there is a doctor's note saying otherwise, but that is a school rule. That is an expectation. So when that school rule is in place, you need to abide by that, and you need to do it. Likewise, if there's a synchronous teaching opportunity there, you have to have your students online. That is not negotiable, because your student doesn't feel like I said earlier, getting up for that first period online class. It has to happen if it's a synchronous opportunity. So that's extremely important, and we want you to make your choices accordingly when you choose which of those three options we're making available to you.
Okay. Let's say we're about 9 minutes over here, taking all these questions. Great information. There's a lot. There's a lot for people to digest, and I know from our part, all of this forum, our slide deck will be posted tomorrow, along with when we send our message out for the selection of which option you're taking. So there's a lot of information for everyone to digest tonight. We've been in it for a while, and it's a lot for us too, right? So as we wrap up, final thoughts from the three of you of your message to parents and our community about what our efforts are and what we're hoping to accomplish by the start of the school year.
So I'll kick it off here, and I think Dr. Dietrich ended it very well there. I'm very proud of the fact that we have so many options for our families and what we're trying to do here. And I think people need to take all of that under advisement and make the right decision. And if they don't like certain aspects of one program, the last example he utilized there was the synchronous option. If you don't think your child can get up for first period and log on at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, then maybe that synchronous option isn't for you, and the hybrid option isn't for you. So given the facts that we know right now and what we've outlined tonight, we just ask that people make the best choice for them and their families. I do want to say, and this is the third time I've done it today, and I won't do it again at least 3 times in a day, and not just to butter up my boss, but people have really, really been working so hard to provide all of this. And I'm sure everybody watches the news and sees all the polarizing information that's out there. And I'm sure maybe the Facebook thread tonight has some things in it that are argumentative. But if in any way, if through a screen, if I can convey to you how much we all care, and in particular, your superintendent cares. Curt Dietrich has worked around the clock to the extent that he is calling Dr. Ruffo and I at 10:30 at night and 6:30 in the morning on weekends. And we're supposed to have off on Fridays. So we genuinely care about our staff and our students and their families. We are trying so hard to make this work for you. But I don't want to oversell my efforts. Dr. Dietrich has been a hero, and he is built for this. And so on behalf of North Penn, I just think we're all super lucky to have him leading us.
Absolutely. And I couldn't be prouder of our staff, our administrative team. Just know that none of us have a crystal ball, so we don't know what's going to happen, but we are preparing ourselves and equipping ourselves that we're in the best position no matter what. And I really believe that whatever happens, we're going to be ready for it. And we take our responsibility to keep your children safe and to keep our staff safe very seriously. And we are really working tirelessly to make that happen. So we know that your children are your most precious belongings to you. And, as parents, everyone here, we want to make sure that what we're offering your children is the same things that we would expect for our own. So thank you for entrusting them to our care. And we really are going to do the absolute best we can to make this work and to keep your kids and your families safe.
Absolutely, and well said. Thank you for the kind comments, Dr. Bauer and Dr. Rufo. But it's a team effort. Just a tremendous team that we have at North Penn. So we figure out a way, and this is another opportunity for us to come together and figure this out and to provide, the best education in the safest manner possible for the children of our community. So we are working tirelessly on that, and we want to be able to present these options to you. So look for an email. We'll be emailing it to you to make your selection. If you have any clarifying questions that you need, don't hesitate to contact your principal. And or if, for example, maybe an assistant principal, if the person you have, the ability to contact like that, send them an email and say, hey, I wasn't real clear about this or that. Could you just clarify it before I make my selection? Because that communication is extremely important. But together we'll get through all of this because we're North Penn strong. So with that, Bob, it's back to you.
All righty. Thank you so much. Awesome job tonight getting through all the material. Again, this will be posted on our website tomorrow, npenn.org. You will be getting an email from us as well with the selection form that's in the email, along with the information and links to all of this tonight and this presentation. So if you have any other questions, like Dr. Dietrich said, reach out to your school. We have all of your feedback from tonight to continue to put it into our plans and see what works and the ideas that are here. And we really appreciate everybody that was online tonight. We had several thousand with us, so thank you so much. And with that, we all say good night. Have a great night, North Penn.